Tell us, how many vaccinations are on offer and are going to be available as of Monday?
So there's going to be over about 4,000 practices that will be having the vaccines, and certainly the GP respiratory clinics that were set up in the early stages of the COVID pandemic to do the testing are now also morphing into also being vaccination providers. So there will be significant reach across the country for access to the vaccine, and certainly from a rural and remote perspective, we welcome that. Obviously, the logistics and getting the vaccine distributed to all these practices at the same time is going to not necessarily be without hiccups, but what we do know is that they are trying to get the vaccines out to all corners of this very vast country as quickly as they can. Now, the issue is that we are still limited with a supply of overseas vaccinations coming in. Once the domestic supply becomes available, more may be available, but we'll also see more providers come online as that domestic supply becomes available as well.
Yeah, well, the domestic supplier is meant to be producing 1 million doses a week from the 50 million that will eventually come from the locally produced AstraZeneca. Have you been told that is going to meet that target? Is 1 million right, or is it still a little bit behind schedule?
Really, it's all just waiting on, my understanding, is the final TGA approval, and it's important that process can be fast-tracked but not corners cut. And I think that's the important element with the domestic supply. So we want to make sure that whatever is provided is, works properly, is effective and is safe. As the testing has been done and the assessment has been done for the Pfizer vaccine and the overseas supply of the AstraZeneca vaccine. So we need to ensure that these vaccinations are as safe as we can make them before they are distributed and start being given to the population.
Okay, so what information don't you have that you need right now?
Really, it's just about getting the timing right in relation to the supply of the vaccines into the practices. We do understand that some practices, were hoping for more, but obviously with over 4,000 practices and over 100 GP respiratory clinics, as well as our Aboriginal community control clinics, they will all be receiving vaccinations. So when we say only, 50 being provided, there will be a supply every week. That is one thing we have been assured of. So we just need to really wait and see to make sure that those logistics are working well and that we don't have any hiccups. Now, we do know some GP practices, and I think rightly so, are just holding off until their supply hits their fridges before they start scheduling appointments, because what they don't want to do is have people take a day off so that they can come in and get the vaccination, and then something's gone wrong with the delivery and it hasn't turned up, and at the last minute appointments are cancelled. So I think for people just to be patient with their GP, give them a call, in the next few days, maybe in the next week or two. And I think as time evolves, we'll see the clinics, really well structured and getting the vaccinations out to everybody who needs them. We are lucky because of the low community transmission. We have a bit of time.
Well, Peter, I hate to be cynical, but it seems like the PR campaign is not exactly lining up with your reality.
Look, I think we all understand, as again, the country's rather big and the logistics are going to be the challenge. And certainly, when we get out into these smaller remote communities, what we do know is with this supply, they're likely to get their whole community vaccinated pretty quickly in reality, which is a good thing. But we do know that, transport and that can often run into challenges. Obviously, we're seeing some issues with weather in Sydney, and certainly rural and remote Australia aren't exempt to weather issues and things like that. So I think we just need to have some realistic expectations. But the GPs are certainly ready, but they're just waiting to make sure that, there is a guaranteed supply, because they really don't want to be, setting up, clinics and appointments and then having to cancel them if the supply doesn't come through. So I think for the communities, just to be a little bit patient, contact their GP in a week or so. Check on the website whether or not the practice is or where the closest practice is to giving the vaccine, or the GP respiratory clinic, so the patients are ready themselves to make their appointment. But I think, some of the practices may be just holding off just to ensure that supply is available. And that's okay. That's reasonable, we think.
Okay, good to know. Well, we hope it all goes smoothly and we can get those vaccines out of the freezers into people's arms as soon as possible. Peter Rutherford, appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.